The ancient Greeks were fascinated by mythological monsters and creatures. They were a central part of their culture, mythology, and art, and were believed to have supernatural powers and abilities, but instead were inspired by real-life animals, fossils, and natural phenomena. Recent studies have revealed that many of the ancient myths were born from the discovery of fossils. The sites where these fossils were found were often considered sacred and were believed to be the dwelling places of gods and monsters. In trying to make sense of what they were seeing, the ancient Greeks created myths and stories about these creatures. As we continue to uncover more about the ancient world and the mysteries of fossils, we may discover even more about the real-life inspirations behind these legendary monsters. In this video, we uncover the shocking truth behind 10 mythical creatures that may have existed in reality, delving into the scientific and historical evidence that supports this theory. Number 10. Dire wolves. The dire wolf, which was much larger than a modern wolf, lived in the Americas until it died out around 10,000 years ago. The La Brea tar pits in Los Angeles have discovered over 4,000 fossilized remains of dire wolves. It is thought that they became ensnared while feeding on the carcasses of other trapped animals. The dire wolf had a larger skull than the modern wolf, but a smaller brain. If dire wolves' brains had been bigger, they might have realized that those animals were trapped in the tar pits for a reason. Although albino cubs have been born in the modern wolf population, there is no evidence that an albino dire wolf ever existed. Number 9. Basilisks. A basilisk was a serpent with a lethal gaze and terrible breath, according to Greek myth and Harry Potter. It was said to have been hatched by a serpent from an egg laid by a cockerel. It allegedly feared only the cock's crowing and the weasel, which is immune to basilisk venom. The basilisk was a normal-sized creature in Greek myth, but it had grown to monstrous proportions by the time it arrived at Hogwarts. The mythical basilisk was most likely an Egyptian cobra, a particularly dangerous snake that hisses constantly and spits venom up to 8 feet away, while aiming for its victim's eyes. This could explain the legend that the basilisk killed those who looked it in the eyes. The cobra's main predator is the mongoose, which looks a lot like a weasel. Alexander the Great is said to have defeated a basilisk using a mirror. The snake died instantly when it saw its own reflection. Number 8. Banshees. A banshee, Gaelic for woman of the fairies, was a beautiful young woman with flowing white hair and eyes red from crying, who keen to warn the person who heard it that someone in their family would die. Rather than being a threat, it was intended to give people time to say their final goodbyes to loved ones. It is unknown when the legend began. The banshee was mentioned in a written history of the town of Torlo in 1350, and the stories were still being told in the mid-19th century. Keening was a traditional form of female grief expression. They would gather at the graveside to lament their loss. After it became a tourist attraction to watch the keeners at a real Irish funeral, this practice gradually died out during the 19th century. However, it is easy to see why the romantic Irish, who were always willing to believe in the supernatural, would combine the idea of a fairy woman with the sadness of women keening over their dead to create a beautiful banshee to call their family home to say their final goodbyes. Number 7. Vampires. Bram Stoker's novel Dracula, 1897, established the modern vampire as a pale, thin stranger with an improbable accent who sleeps in a coffin and is more or less immortal. Stoker based his character on historical accounts of Vlad the Impaler. Stoker may also have been inspired by the many rumors and superstitions surrounding death and burial at the time, as well as his ignorance about how the body decays. The skin of the corpse shrinks after death. As a result, its teeth and fingernails become more visible and appear to have grown. Additionally, as internal organs degrade, purge fluid can leak from the nose and mouth, leaving a dark stain. This could have been interpreted as the corpse drinking blood from the living. The evidence from the coffin itself was also present. Scratches were occasionally discovered on the insides of caskets, which was interpreted as proof that the dead had become undead and emerged from their coffins. Unfortunately, it is more likely that the undead died, and that people who were in a coma, for example, were buried in the mistaken belief that they had died. They may have attempted to free themselves after regaining consciousness. It is thought that the philosopher and monk John Duns Scotus died in this manner. His body was discovered in a crypt outside his coffin, his hands bloodied and bruised from attempting to escape. Number 6. Giants. For thousands of years, giants have been a part of folklore. The Gigantes are a tribe of 100 giants who were born of the goddess Gaia after she was impregnated with blood collected during Uranus's castration. A Gelma was created in Norse mythology from drops of water that formed when the land of ice met the land of heat and fire. He had to be quite large. The earth was formed from his flesh, the seas from his blood, the mountains from his bones, the stones from his teeth, the sky from his skull, and the clouds from his brain. after he was killed by the gods. His eyebrows even became the barrier that surrounded Midgard, which is the Viking word for earth. Some of the beliefs in giants may be explained by hereditary gigantism. Scientists believe they have found a gene that causes familial gigantism. According to researchers, people with gigantism may have a pituitary tumor that stimulates growth. Goliath, the biblical giant, was said to stand over 9 feet tall. There is no modern definition of what height qualifies as giants, because different societies' average heights vary by as much as 11.8 inches. According to a study published in the Ulster Medical Journal, Goliath, who was famously defeated by David, had an identifiable family tree, suggestive of autosomal dominant inheritance. David's pebble struck Goliath in the forehead. If Goliath had a pituitary tumor pressing on his optic chiasma, which is the part of the brain where the optic nerves cross, he would have had visual disturbances, making it difficult for him to see the stone. Number 5. Mermaids. Mermaid legends have existed almost as long as people have sailed the seas. Thessalic's story was one of the first to be recorded about mermaids. She was said to be Alexander the Great's half-sister. He rinsed his sister's hair in the Fountain of Youth after embarking on a perilous quest to find it. When Alexander died, his sister attempted suicide by drowning in the sea. She couldn't die, so she turned into a mermaid instead. According to legend, she would ask sailors, "Is Alexander the king alive?" If they said, "He lives, reigns, and conquers the world," she would let them sail away. If they said he was dead, she would turn into a monster and drag the ship to the bottom of the sea. One possible explanation for the persistence of mermaid sightings is that sailors mistook a mermaid for a manatee, a fantastic creature with the body of a fish, but the head and torso of a beautiful woman. It is fair to say that the manatee is not the most visually appealing creature on the planet. So, how did the sailors make such a blunder? Manatees, on the other hand, can hold their heads above water and turn them from side to side in the same way that humans can. When viewed from behind, the rough skin may appear to be long hair. It is also known that sailors who are at sea for an extended period of time experience sailing hallucinations. So, if they were at a distance or in poor lighting, they might mistake a manatee for a mermaid. Number 4. Hydra. The Hydra was a massive sea serpent with 9 heads, one of which was immortal in Greek mythology. When one head was severed, 2 more would sprout from the fresh wound. One of Hercules' 12 labors was to kill the Hydra. To accomplish this, he enlisted the assistance of his nephew, who cauterized the wounds while Hercules severed the heads, leaving only the immortal head. Hercules also severed that one and buried it beneath a large rock. Nature may have inspired the myth of the Hydra. Many documented cases of snakes with multiple heads exist. Polycephaly appears to be more common in reptiles than in any other species. Scientists studying conjoined twins have even been able to create polycephalic animals. Hans Spemann tied young salamander embryos together with a strand of human baby hair in the early 20th century to produce salamander babies with 2 heads. Number 3. The Kraken. The Kraken was said to be powerful enough to drag a ship to the depths by wrapping its massive tentacles around it or swimming in circles around it to create a maelstrom that would drag the ship down. The first written account of the Kraken was in 1180, and there were numerous accounts of a massive tentacled sea monster dragging ships to their doom. The Kraken was said to be capable of devouring an entire ship's crew in one bite. The Kraken myth is most likely based on sightings of a species of giant squid which can grow to be about 59 feet long, or possibly the colossal squid, which is much larger than the giant squid and can grow to unknown lengths. Because they live in the deep waters of Antarctica, very few colossal squid have ever been discovered intact. As a result, finding evidence of how squid attack their prey has proven extremely difficult. According to recent research, they encircle prey with their tentacles before dragging it to them and eating it. Number 2. Cyclops. The Cyclops were gigantic creatures with a single eye in the center of each of their heads in Greek mythology. They were mostly known for their savagery, as they were not afraid of either men or gods. Polyphemus, the most famous Cyclops, attacked Odysseus in a cave and devoured half of his men. Odysseus blinded the Cyclops by piercing its single eye with a wooden stake. Then Odysseus and his men escaped by tying themselves to sheep's undersides. This may appear implausible. However, there appeared to be some fairly solid proof of Cyclops' existence for a time. A single eye socket in the center of the head was found in many skulls. The skulls turned out to be those of dwarf elephants. The eye socket was the elephant's central nasal cavity and the opening for its trunk. Many dwarf elephant skulls have been discovered in Cyprus, particularly in caves thought to be home to the Cyclops. As a result, it's understandable that an elephant skull was used to prove the existence of a race of giant. And now? Number 1. The duck-billed platypus. Although not as ancient of a mythical creature as the others on this list, the duck-billed platypus was once considered a mythological creature, despite being a more recent story than some of the others. But it's completely real, albeit a little odd-looking. When it was discovered in the 18th century, many people thought it was a ridiculous hoax, and not without reason. Naturalists used taxidermy and their creative imaginations to create all kinds of strange creatures during this time period. Albertus Sieber, for example, had an entire cabinet of curiosities. Some were genuine, while others were not. The seven-headed hydra, for example, was revealed to be a sack full of snakes sewn onto the body of a weasel. The platypus appears to be equally implausible. It resembled the beak of a duck grafted on the head of a quadruped, according to English zoologist George Shaw in 1799. The platypus is notable for many reasons other than its unusual appearance. Naturalists couldn't tell whether the creature was a mammal or not. Did it lay eggs or have live children? It took another 100 years for scientists to figure out the answer. The platypus is one of the few mammal species that can lay eggs. Well, that's the end of today's video. Have you heard of any of these mythical creatures' stories? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next strange and unusual video.